making her students come up with math problems like regarding slavery, because I guess she was trying to intertwine social studies with math.
Stuff, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so like, it's crazy. Like, I don't think that she was trying to cause any harm, but like, it's just.
There's so many other social studies topics to pull from.
I just read it yesterday. I was like, oh my God.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. And so first, I'm going to give us our cues we're going to do, because we're going to break out into some small groups. And so if I say class, class, I need you to say yes, yes. So let's practice. Class, class.
Yes, yes.
Class, class.
Yes, yes.
And if I don't say class, class, yes, yes, I'll ask if you hear my voice clap one time, then we'll clap. If you hear my voice clap 2 times. So today we're going to talk about culturally responsive teaching, understanding diverse classrooms, because what we know, and it's pretty much common sense, that our population is increasingly becoming more diverse. And as our population increasingly becomes more diverse, our teaching population is not as diverse. So arriving at the point of being culturally responsive, I kind of went through a journey. I am blessed, I am privileged, because at the end of this academic year, it'll be my 21st year in education. So that must mean I must like this job. I must love this job. There's just something about what I do. And so over the years, thinking about that, I started in the classroom as a social studies teacher. Then I transitioned to a communication arts teacher. Then one of my principals came up with this fabulous idea that we were going to have a team of students that were just out of control and nobody knew how to deal with. So we were going to create this team for them to work with them, because not only were they having behavioral issues, they were having academic issues. And so once that principal did that, then I had a series of principals that would always put me with the kids that were quote unquote labeled the bad kids.
Yeah.
And so at a point in my career, I was like, oh, can I work with some gifted and talented kids? Because this is a little too much. So eventually, cooperating, working together, a light bulb went off, and my principal was like, you're always doing these projects. Have you ever thought about being a principal? And I was like, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? I have no desire to do what it is that you do. But lo and behold, I decided to make that transition. And then one of my mentors said, great at what you do. Have you ever thought about training individuals? Maybe you should transition into higher ed, start your own consulting firm. And I said, that sounds interesting. So I did that too. So 14 years in the classroom, 3 years as an administrator, and at the end of this academic year, it will be my 4th year in higher ed. I'm assistant professor at Southeast Missouri State University, the university of first choice, where we provide a stellar education for individuals that are willing and ready to do what's in the best interest of the population that they're going to serve. So when we think about being culturally responsive, that's what we're talking about. So today, we're going to explore race, language, gender, and sexual orientation. And yes, I said sexual orientation. And when we hear that word sometimes in schools, specifically elementary educators, they said sexual orientation has nothing to do with elementary school. Like, yes, it does. It's part of culture. And we need to make sure that we're equipped, we're prepared, and we're ready to deal and effectively educate the individuals that we're responsible to deal with each and every day. We're going to work in cooperative learning groups where we have the opportunity to dialogue and share, to get a better understanding of what being culturally responsive is, and then to try to, by the end of our short time together, I want us to kind of map out a plan of action of what it is that you can do in your classroom or whatever institution you're at to make sure that you're engaging in culturally responsive practices. So, I want everybody to stand up. This is something I did when I first started teaching, and I still do it to this day when I do seminars and when I'm with my students each day. So we do this thing called a class model, and we do poems because I want everybody to understand it's not about the person standing in front of you. We're here to do it together, so it's a give-take situation. So on the count of 3, we're going to recite the model, and then we'll move to the poems. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. This day has been given to me fresh and clear. I can either use it or throw it away. I promise that I will use this day to the fullest, realizing that it will never come back again. I realize that this is my life to use or throw away. I say, are we motivated? You say, We'll try that again so we can be in unison. All right, are we motivated?
Motivated, motivated, downright motivated. Drive on, Dr. Smith, drive on, boom.
Good. Excuses. Excuses are monuments of nothing that build bridges that lead to nowhere. And those who use these tools of incompetence are masters of nothing. Therefore, we do not use excuses. Task. Once the task has begun, never leave until it's done. Whether the task be great or small, do it right or not at all. Please be seated. Now, each and every day, I initially start off teaching this way. And as an infant teacher, I would walk down the hallway and I would see one of my colleagues doing that motto. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I think I need to steal that idea. So I just went to him and I said, hey, what is this that you're doing? And he said, I got this from Marva Collins, fabulous educator. And this is something she did with her students. I said, well, do you mind if I use the idea? And he was like, go for it. So I did that. The poems and the motto. I was in the United States Army and I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And so I got these ideas from the Army and my sorority. And so having my students and myself say this each and every day, and participants when I'm doing staff development seminars, it lets each one of us know when we talk about being culturally responsive, that when we talk about educating, it's everybody's responsibility. It's not just the person standing in front of you responsibility to make sure that you receive a quality education. And that's important for us to have a general understanding. Because oftentimes what happens from a student perspective, they look to us for all this guidance, for all this knowledge, and they think I guess we're just going to open their brain and we're just going to pour it all in. But that doesn't happen. It's a give and take. We work together. So sometimes they teach us and we sit back, and sometimes we facilitate and they sit back, but we work together using a collaborative spirit to make sure we're doing what's in the best interest of our students. Now, one thing we see going on across the country is that there are a number of educators in a number of institutions that are experiencing a disconnect. And so, from all of my experience and just going around doing different things, working with different educators, I came up with this concept and model because I said, how did this happen? Because when I was in school, when my parents were in school, when my grandparents were in school, there was no disconnect. There was a happy circle like you see that with the child in the middle. The home, the school, the community, and the church. And I use the word church that just is any faith-based organization. So if it's a mosque, synagogue, or if you go to church online, doesn't make a difference. But that just represents the faith-based community. The child, doesn't make a difference if we're talking about elementary, middle, or high school, travels between these four entities on a daily basis. And what we're experiencing today is that there is a disconnect between these four entities. And so how did this disconnect come about? If we think about Leave It to Beaver, remember Leave It to Beaver? Wally and Beav. And if we think about Bill Cosby, oh, those were the American families. Everything was just in sync. Everything was in order, from them being the nice family to the communities that they lived in. And again, if you think about your childhood or your parents' or your grandparents' childhood, you can reflect that what the child did at home was relayed to school, was relayed to the church, was relayed to the greater community. And everybody let children know that it was important to have an education. Not just about the importance of education, but the purpose of the education and why you need the education and how you can benefit from the education. So when we look at this disconnect, we have to come to a consensus as to why this happened and what is it that we need to do to bridge this gap. And so again, when we look at the population of children that we are serving, when we look at it from a cultural realm and a linguistic realm, there are a lot of differences. And if we sit back and think about when we were prepared to teach, did they teach you sincerely, if we think about it? Were we really trained and prepared to work with diverse populations? There was no class that I took in undergraduate studies on working with diverse populations. One, maybe I'll say one, that was Exceptional Child. That was the only class. And that was just one class. And so when you think about you leaving the university as you matriculated now, boom! You're a full-fledged teacher and you have to go out into the world and you have to educate people that are unlike you. sometimes you kind of say, oh my God, what do I do? I wasn't prepared for this. How do I go about this? So in order to bridge this gap, we have to go back to the Leave It to Beaver model. We have to go back to the Bill Cosby model, as I say. And we have to become a close-knit community and family. So, if you are doing something that is not appropriate and not right, I'm going to bring that to your attention, using that as an example. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to let your parents know that what you're doing is inappropriate. And what are you going to do about it? And there's going to be a consequence for that behavior. I'm not going to continue to allow you to engage in that type of behavior. Because if you allow the child to continue to do something that's inappropriate and they have no knowledge of it, they'll continue that behavior pattern. For example, a number of us allow young men to come into our classrooms with their pants sagging. I use Lil Wayne as a prime example because kids love Lil Wayne. Teenagers love Lil Wayne's, and people in their 20s and 30s, they love Lil Wayne. And when my nephew was in high school, whenever Lil Wayne would come to St. Louis, I would take him to see Lil Wayne because he was just crazy about Lil Wayne. Lyrically, he is a beast. He is on top of his game, lyrically. But the things that he does and the position that he is in, he himself cannot relate and understand the impact that he is having, the influence that he is having on our children and people across this country. So he's not looking at himself per se as a role model, but all of us are role models. So culturally, he's not being responsive because he's not doing what's in the best interest of the population that he's serving, because he's engaging in behaviors that are unbecoming. So as educators, with that example, when young men come into our classrooms and their pants are sagging, you have to take a look at them and say, where are you going? Not here. Back out the door and come back in here with your pants up. Oh, what I gotta do that for? You tripping. No, I'm not tripping. This is my classroom, and I build men and women. And men and women don't sag their pants. You have to provide them with other images and other examples. They can't go to work with their pants sagging. If they're an entrepreneur, because everybody's not going to go to work, some people are going to create work for themselves. You have to put images in front of them. Transition from Lil Wayne to Jay-Z so they can see the evolution. And they can have a better understanding. And I use these examples because these are examples that our children can relate to. We have to remember, they might not even know who Bill Cosby is. But I know everybody in here knows who Bill Cosby is. So you have to use examples that they can understand. So talk about Lil Wayne and then tell them how Jay-Z started and how he's evolved so that they can see that Jay-Z knew that I'm not going to be 20-something all my life. At each phase of life I go through, there are going to be some different things that I need to do because I'm a man. And you put those images in front of them, you're helping them have a better understanding of what it is that they need to do, what it is that they're supposed to do. So when we're looking at that, in order to do that, the first thing that we have to do, because before you can even start thinking about being culturally responsive, even having an understanding of what being culturally responsive is, you have to take a look at yourself. So I would like for you to open the packet, and there's a sheet that says, who am I? And we're going to take about 3 to 5 minutes. And what I want you to do is I want you to just jot down who you are in your words. Play like we don't know each other. We've never met each other. We don't know anything about each other. And this is a great opportunity for you yourself as you're listening to me now and you're writing. This is a great opportunity for you yourself because we ourselves don't take the time to get to know ourselves. And if you don't know yourself, you can't begin to build and maintain a relationship with somebody else. So let's take 3 to 5 minutes to just kind of jot down who we are so we can get a better understanding of what that looks like from our perspective. we're bringing it to a close. Let's make that your last sentence. Of course, if we had more time, I'll give you more time. All right. Now, again, when we talk about working with others, it's imperative that you have an understanding of who you are at this specific place, at this specific time, and how you got here. That means you have to deal with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And oftentimes in education, we don't want to deal with the ugly. We don't want to deal with the problems that we know exist. Sometimes we try to sweep it under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist. Or sometimes we just walk by and just act like it didn't even happen. So again, taking the time to look at who you are and how you got there. And I tell people sometimes, again, in education, we don't pat ourselves on the back. We don't give ourselves enough credit. We don't like to talk about ourselves. But if you don't feel good about who you are and confident and believe in yourself and know that what you bring to the table is of value, what makes you think that anybody else will believe that? You should feel good to brag about yourself. When you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, you pretend this is a mirror. Hello, me. You are fabulous. You are beautiful. You are ready to tackle the world. You got to have conversations with yourself because the charge each one of us has is phenomenal. And I don't know if we've taken the time to actually think about that. Each one of us has a privilege, an opportunity, and an honor each day to educate. And notice you hear me use the word educate. Teach, you're just teaching a subject. Educate, you're doing much more. You're focusing in on the whole child. You're not looking at the academic aspect, because if we teach, we're just looking at the academic side. To educate is to do more. So as I progress and I think about who I am, and I do this every time. I did this like 15 to 20 times, and it just gets longer and longer and longer and more detailed. So I'll share. I am the apple of my eye, the center of attention, because I exalt excellence. I know that life in and of itself provides each one of us with many opportunities. I come from a culture grounded in encouraging, inspiring, loving, and uplifting people. I have the will and diligence to make this world a better place. With the genes of my mother, my father, my grandparents, and my ancestors, I have been blessed to continue our tradition and explore this great planet and leave it better than when I inherited it. I am Harriet, I am Malcolm, I am Sojourner, I am Martin. Their legacy has opened doors of opportunity for me. So as I reflect on that, and when I think about that, and when I go into the classroom to prep pre-service teachers and pre-service principals, the zeal that I bring, the passion that I bring, because I want them to feel my energy, because again, to be an educator is phenomenal. And I can't let anybody take that away from us. To be an educator, you have to be skilled at the art form, because it is an art form. You have to be able to pull whatever it is inside of your student, you have to be able to pull it out of them. There are only 2 other people in here that look like me. The other individuals in here, you don't look like me. But if I say, oh my God, I don't know how to work with them, what am I going to do? My presentation would just be a waste. But there are colleagues of ours that go into the classroom each and every day because they don't know who they are themselves. They haven't been able to identify with themselves. They are having a very difficult time identifying with their children. And again, it doesn't make a difference if we're talking about elementary, middle school, or high school. Whichever level you work on, you've got to feel comfortable with yourself. So that if some bias, some prejudice, some issue comes up in you, that is the light bulb. And you need to deal with it right then and right there. Again, using the example of Lil Wayne. We have a lot of Lil Wayne sitting in our classrooms across America. And because of the negative images that are portrayed about black boys, already there are biases embedded in our minds because of what we're bombarded with each and every day. So for us to kind of push it down and not deal with it, it is unhealthy. And it doesn't help us when we're trying to transition and become culturally responsive. You have to be yourself in order for the other person to appreciate you and respect you. Because if you come in and you're phony, it's not going to work. And we have to keep that in mind. So, when we look at how we're going to transition to make sure that we're engaging in culturally responsive practices, we have to first understand what culture is. We have to have a general understanding and the know-how of pedagogy, which transitions us into being culturally responsive. So we'll take a look at what researchers, so we can have a common definition of culture. Culture is the shared perceptions of a group's values, expectations, and norms. It reflects the way people give priorities to goals, how they behave in different situations, and how they cope with their world and with one another. People experience their social environment through culture, and it's transmitted from generation to generation. I want us to pay attention to it saying how they cope with their world and with one another. So at each table, we're going to pretend those are islands. So each one of us comes from a various cultural group. So your table is your cultural realm. And we'll play like the red, orangish part of the carpet. We're going to play like that is mainstream culture. So when we leave our little island to come to the main island, if we haven't learned the norms and the rituals and the customs of the main island, we don't function very well here. So we resort to going back to our little island. So when we think about what happens in our classroom, sometimes as educators, we assume that the students coming to us know the norms, the rituals, and the culture. And we've got to remember that our educational system is based on middle-class value systems. And if our children are not from middle class, they might not necessarily understand those norms and those rituals. So we have to provide them with the general understanding of what that is. Like we know, you cannot come in class looking like Lil Wayne. It's unacceptable. Now, I'm not saying on your island you can't be Lil Wayne, because that's your island. So I'm not going to disrespect, I'm not going to grade what it is that you're doing, because I'm going to allow you to do that. But at the same time, I'm going to train and prepare you how to function so that you can coexist in mainstream culture as well as your culture. So I'm not forcing you to assimilate or culturate. Because sometimes what happens, we can use English language learners as another example. When English language learners come into this country, depending on what system the school system is using, they might either do full language immersion, where they just speak English and the child cannot use their native tongue at all, or they'll let them use the dual language system. Now, what research shows is that it's better to allow them to engage in the dual language system, because think about it. Pretend if all of us had the opportunity to go to Russia on a foreign exchange program, and they said we get to go over there, we're so happy because we're going to teach and everything, and then we get in there and nobody speaks a lick of English. And so you're like, okay, you have no idea what they're saying. So just with those brief seconds, I want us to think about how our ELLs feel when they come into our classrooms and they have no knowledge of what's going on. They have no understanding. And if they're just forced to communicate in English, they don't even know English. And when you're learning a new language, you have to remember, first they have to learn how to speak English. We're not even talking about the academic piece of English, because that's totally different. So once we get a general understanding